नमो ब्रह्मादिभ्यो ब्रह्मविद्या संप्रदायकर्तृभ्यो वंशऋषिभ्यो महद्भ्यो नमो गुरुभ्यः। सर्वोपप्लवरहितः प्रज्ञानघनः प्रत्यगर्थो ब्रह्मैवाहमस्मि ब्रह्मैवाहमस्मि। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। ॐ ईशावास्यमिदं सर्वं यत्किञ्च जगत्यां जगत् तेन त्यक्तेन भुञ्जीथा मा गृधः कस्य स्विद्धनम् कुर्वन्नेवेह कर्माणि जिजीविषेच्छतं समाः। एवं त्वयि न कर्म लिप्यते नरे। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। So the mantra that we studied in our previous class, Kurvanneveha karmani jijivishet shatam samaha evam tvai nanyathe tosti na karma lipyate nare. This second mantra in which the last word nara, nare, that is the key word, that till you are, what this mantra basically, as we explained in our previous class, that if a person wants to live for a complete 100 years, which means complete span of his life, he should do so by working hard. This is the only way to engage oneself in good deeds, in noble deeds, in deeds that are beneficial, such as the practice of yoga, starting from this charity. Wherever we work hard, it already benefits us by reducing the amount of time we spend in performing meaningless or harmful activities. So therefore the last word that has, this we explained in our previous class, the whole mantra. But the last word, nara, nare, which by the way has its cognate in like most of the Sanskrit words have cognates in various European languages. The word nara finds its cognate in a name, Nero, which was also the name of a Roman emperor, where the word means vigorous, strong, very strong. And the word nara in Sanskrit, though it has come to mean now human being, simply human being, the root nri, which means to lead, and therefore nara also means a leader. Somebody, because he is strong, he is vigorous, he leads. So the word nara many times in Vedic Sanskrit has also been used in the sense of a leader, in the sense of someone who leads, in the sense who is extremely strong and vigorous. However, here in this mantra, it means, it has been used in a very specific significance, that till a person identifies with this body, till that identification is there, till the identification with the body is there, till the ego completely identifies only with this body and nothing beyond. In other words, who thinks that I am the leader and hence still has that strong ego, that sense of doership, that sense of agency, that I'm the one who is doing it. Till that understanding is there, a person constantly needs to engage in noble deeds, needs to engage in good deeds. And I think this is a major difference between Sankhya and Vedanta. Both approach meditation. With yoga, it depends which philosophy it follows. Yoga has a very practical approach. Some scholars in the yogic tradition follow the Sankhya philosophy, and some scholars in the yogic tradition follow the Vedanta philosophy. So we have to make this difference clear. The difference between Sankhya and yoga, Sankhya versus yoga, or even the difference between Buddhism versus Vedanta, because Buddhism also has the same approach, is that the moment Sankhya starts off speaking about meditation, Buddhism starts off speaking about meditation, it speaks of giving up activity. It speaks of giving up action. For example, a typical Sankhya quotation would be Karmana badhyate jantuhu, actions lead us to bondage, vidyaya cha vimuchyate, understanding leads us to freedom, tasmat karma na kurvanti yataya paradarshinaha. Therefore, practitioners of meditation who try to see beyond, they don't work. They rather pursue the path of knowledge, the path of understanding. On the other hand, when it comes to Vedanta, when it comes to the Upanishads, when it comes to the Vedic understanding, then there the idea is, rather than giving up action itself, the attempt should be to surrender the sense of doership, surrendering the sense of agency, rather than surrendering actions themselves. First of all, surrendering the fruits of one's actions, which we discussed in our previous class, which is what Karma Yoga is about, which is what Ishvara Pranidhana in Patanjali's understanding, when he speaks of Ishvara Pranidhana as part of Kriya Yoga in the first sutra of the second chapter, when he speaks of Ishvara Pranidhana as part of the Niyamas. That Ishvara Pranidhana, which means surrender to the divine, what? Surrendering the fruits of one's actions first, because that is easier to do. And as a person evolves deeper, goes deeper into his practice, eventually even the sense of doership, the sense of agency. But till that Ishvara Pranidhana, that deepest Ishvara Pranidhana has not taken place, the idea of giving up work will only, such as if you have been given a piece of tract of land to take care of. If you don't sow good seed into it, if you don't do something to remove its weeds every day, it will be filled with thorns. Even if you don't do anything, that happens very naturally. So similarly, a person constantly has to work, and the word kshetra we see in the Bhagavad Gita is used for this body, and kshetra means field. Idam shariram kaunteya kshetra mityavidhiyate. O Kunti, O son of Kunti, this body is called kshetra. This body is a field. Like we till our land, similarly this body has to be tilled. One has to sow. Yogaja samskara, what Vyasa calls the subtle impressions that are created through the practice of yoga. What does someone who rides a bicycle? In the first day it doesn't happen. He falls down, he bruises his knees, he bruises his body, yet still he has to practice. The samskara is already that subtle impression in his unconscious mind already gets impressed in the very first day, in the very first attempt. And then he just has to strengthen it further. And then suddenly a day comes when he rides the bicycle in full speed. He does not fall down. What has happened? What has changed? The samskara which was impressed on the first day has been strengthened. And now he can ride the bicycle without any understanding. This is how we learn to walk. Look at a child, how difficult it is for a child to stand up. It keeps on falling down again and again, again and again. Yet it attempts. It keeps on trying, because that wish to get out of that animal state of crawling on all the 4 feet, 2 hands and 2 feet, to stand up, to become human, to understand the meaning, what it means to become human, is so innate, is so deep in that child that he constantly makes an attempt to stand up again and again. Many times while the child runs, it falls down, it bruises its knees, it weeps, yet it constantly tries. Till a day comes. So what has happened? In the case of the bicycle rider, after a while, he can even ride the bicycle without holding the handle. What has happened? The samskara, the subtle impression, which was impressed on the very first day, that has been strengthened. So this is what the yogis call yogaja samskara. Every practice, every asana, every pranayama, every practice of asana, pranayama, meditation, whatever we do, the first time we do it, it leaves, because it is an experience. And every experience leaves a subtle impression. And then every time we have that experience, that subtle impression gets strengthened. And the more it gets strengthened, the more that subtle impression becomes strong, the more that samskara becomes strong, the more we master that particular sthiti, that particular state. May it be a state of asana, may it be a state of pranayama, may it be a state of dhyana, may it be a state of meditation. So that is what collectively in yoga is known as yogaja samskara. Samskara that has been created as a result of yoga. That happens only when a person works. Whether works with his body, whether he works with his prana, he works with his speech, he works with his mind. These are all different aspects of our being, of our personality. And yoga, in its totality, addresses every aspect of ourselves. Every kosha, every layer that is there, it addresses that. So, till that sense of doership, and it's not a belief, one can easily have a belief that I'm not the doer. This is because so many masters, so many great saints and sages have said, thinking that you are the doer is an ego, and therefore give up the ego, therefore give up the sense of doership. We hear and we believe. That's a belief. Acquiring the experience is a different thing. And acquiring a belief because somebody has said it, that is a different thing. So we can have a belief that I'm not the doer. But do we experience that? That's the question. And if we don't experience that, if it does not relate with our deeper inner experience, till then a person should work hard. So this is the fundamental difference between, while the Sankhya approach tells, for the sake of meditation, you have to give up your duties, you have to run away, you have to go into a mountain cave and just sit down for meditation. Yes, that is also required for some time. But the ultimate purpose is to develop that tendency even while working. And therefore, Sankhya has karmatyaga, abandoning, renouncing action for the sake of entering deeper into meditation. That is the Sankhya approach. The Upanishad approach is, while working hard, going deeper through working hard. And that is what Sri Krishna said in the 3rd chapter when he speaks about karma yoga. He says, na karmana manarambhan naishkarmyam purushoshnate. Don't think that this state which transcends all actions is acquired by renouncing actions, by not doing them. Don't think that. On the contrary, the body has to be active, the breath has to be active, the mind has to be active. Like a wheel, each one of them is fully active, and yet at the very center is where the peace lies, is where the stillness lies. So the Upanishads, they speak of that stillness. Their idea is to lead us into that stillness. Otherwise, this dichotomy between karma yoga, the path of selfless action, the path of charity, the path of good deeds, and the path of knowledge, the path of wisdom, the path of contemplation, this dichotomy exists. It has existed, for example, in the Judeo-Christian, in Christianity especially, if you are aware of this, these two characters in the life of Christ, Martha and Mary. The way of Martha is the way of karma yoga. Because what she decided to acquire salvation through action, through working. She used to minister unto the hungry, thirsty, the sick and homeless. That was her path. That is like the path of Karma Yoga, the path of charity. Then the way of Mary, on the other hand, is the way through contemplation. She chose to contemplate. She chose the path in which a person has the vision of God. And as far as I understand it, that in Christian traditions, this dichotomy exists. There are two different approaches. Yet, the work of the Upanishads, the work of Patanjali, the work of the Gita, is to unite these two approaches. So, which means that working ceaselessly, slowly and slowly developing within that work selflessness, within that work eventually giving up the agency of doership, but not stopping to work. And then within that, a person acquires the deepest states of meditation through that work. Yes, in the moments of meditation, of course, when a person sits down, that is what we generally understand by meditation, that a person has to sit down and meditate. Yes, initially for the experience, for the peace of mind, so that we can have that experience. This is important. But then eventually that experience has to permeate every aspect of our life. That is what is known as Sahaja Samadhi, of which the mystics, natural state of Samadhi, in which the same experience of Samadhi also continues and lies at the back of the mind as the very source, as the very substratum of everything that we do, every action that we do. Then every action, yadyat karma karomi tattadakhilam shambho tavaradhanam, O my divine, O my Lord, whatever action I do, with this awareness when I do it, then that action itself, may I be in an asana, may I be ministering unto the sick, whatever I am doing, that becomes a form of worship. That becomes a form of worship to that supreme divinity. So the work of the Upanishads is to unite both, whether it is the same idea we find in the Bhagavad Gita, yajna, sacrifice, dana, charity, tapas, accepting hardship in one's life. And the commentators in the Yoga Sutra make it very clear that the discomfort that we take upon us in the practice of asana, in the practice of pranayama, that is a form of tapas. It is a tapas. The more gladly we take it upon ourselves, the more we develop internally. So yajna, dana, sacrifice, charity, tapas, yajna, dana, tapah, karma, natyajyam karyamevatat. He says, they should be done. Don't give them up, because if a person does it without desiring anything in response, then pavanani manishinam. For such wise men, even these actions themselves, they become a method of inner purification, a method for purifying themselves. This is the whole idea. We also find it in the Upanishads that this is also in relation to not only to tapas, to austerity, which means taking discomfort upon oneself. It is not only in relation to charity, not only in relation to these two things, but also in relation to, for the religious people, when they perform rituals, it is also in relation to that. Therefore, the Upanishads, they speak of two types of worshippers. One who worships a divine other from himself, and someone who worships the divinity within himself. What is the difference between both? One who worships the divinity within himself, he performs the worship rituals only for his inner purification. Idam me anena angam sanskriyate. May this these different parts of my being, the body, the breath, the mind, the intellect, may these different parts of my being, may they be purified. May they become samskrita. May the yogaja samskara, the bad samskaras that are there, may they be reduced and may the good ones be introduced. The samskaras that are there naturally, which we have learnt in the absence of awareness, without being aware of how we sit. We are not aware how we sit. We just in complete negligence, in complete forgetfulness, in complete lack of awareness, we develop a particular tendency of sitting, and that is what harms us. So that that is also a samskara which has strengthened over the years into our body, or a way of thinking, a way of breathing, whatever that might be, a mental pattern. It's a type of samskara. These natural samskaras have to be reduced and can only be reduced by introducing the good ones, the yogaja samskaras, the samskaras that are created as a result of the practice of yoga. So that is what samskara, samskriyate here in this mantra. Idam me anena angam samskriyate. May through this, my different parts of my being, may they be purified. May the samskara, the good samskaras, be strengthened in them. On the other hand, someone who worships a divine out there, he just keeps on worshipping it. This is what one of the Brahmana texts says. He thinks, I'm the servant, I'm serving, and he keeps on bringing gifts to his gods, like a servant, like an inferior who brings tributes to the superior ones. And Devanam Pashu, the Upanishads say, they remain like the Pashu, like the beasts, the animals to their gods. And the beautiful thing is that Pashu, the word for animal in Sanskrit, is also derived from the word to see, and Rishi, the Vedic seers, that word is also derived from to see. Both see, but we can know the difference. The way an animal sees and the way a rishi sees. The animal also sees and the rishi also sees, but one sees with complete awareness and one sees with the absence of awareness. That is the whole difference. Seeing takes place in both cases. Also in the case of an animal, also in the case of a seer, of a rishi. But when the seeing happens with awareness, then he becomes a rishi. So this is what we discussed basically in the previous shloka. Now what about the next one, the next shloka, the next mantra, the third one? This mantra, let us pronounce it first. Asurya, 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 Nama, 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 Te Loka, Te Loka, Te Loka, Andhena, Andhena, Tamasa, 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 Vritaha, 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 Tanste, 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 Pretya, Pretya Abhigachanti ye ke Chatmahano Janaha Asuryanamate loka andhena tamasavritaha tanste pretyabhigachanti ye ke chatmahano janaha. See, in the Upanishads lies the very foundation of yoga. First of all, the very clear definition, the first definition of yoga ever in any scripture. Even though the Vedas, which are even more ancient than the Upanishads, they frequently use the word yoga. And not only in any sense, but in the sense of union of mind and action. Karma and dhi. Sadhinam yoga minvati. There in the Rig Veda the word yoga has been used in that sense. But the very clear definition of what the word yoga itself means comes for the first time even before Patanjali gave the definition in 250 BC. The Upanishads, which are far more ancient than Patanjali's teachings, give us the first definition of the word yoga. Many core concepts of yoga philosophy have their origins in the Upanishads. One word in Patanjali's sutra, the first sutra, Atha Yoga Anushasanam, which everybody knows, mostly everybody knows. Atha Yoga Anushasanam, that word anu, to teach something after you have learned yourself. That anu, shasana means teaching. I'm teaching yoga. And anushasana means I'm teaching yoga after I have studied it from my masters. So what Patanjali is presenting, he is presenting the teachings of his own masters, probably which he received from his own mother, Gonika. So the tradition, he is within their tradition. And he's just presenting it, yes, what he's doing there, what he's adding to that is his own deep experience. And that is what makes it fresh. That is what makes it new. This is what happens in Guruji's case. The tradition is extremely ancient. But he adds to the pool of wisdom, he adds to the reservoir of wisdom his own experience. And when he teaches from that own experience, then that is the transmission beyond books. Because not everything can be put into the books. Do you think Guruji has presented all his experiences, all his wisdom in the light of yoga? It's not possible. It is impossible. So Patanjali, he states it very clearly, anushasana. And when he speaks of the three methods of correct understanding, first of all, 5 senses through which we understand. For example, in yoga we make use of the tactile sense, such as Guruji was telling us today in our class, the tactile senses. Then we have also to work, sometimes we have to infer when we can't see, when not with our senses, where our senses don't reach, then we have to work with our mind. We have to feel it. We have to infer and we have to feel. And then the third method of acquiring correct understanding, which Patanjali speaks of, is agama. And this is agama. What we are studying here, this is agama. The Upanishads, when Patanjali speaks of pratyakshanumana gamaha pramanani, direct perception, inference, and agama. These three are methods of acquiring correct understanding on the path of yoga. The third thing, agama, is this. This is what he is referring to. The teachings that have, the body of teachings that have traveled down the lineage of the yogic masters. And this is what we get in the form of the Upanishads. And therefore, many core concepts, such as when Guruji was here, when he was speaking about alignment, he spoke that Shri Krishna gave me the plumb line, because in the 6th chapter Shri Krishna talks about sitting in samam kaya shirogrivam, the body, the neck and the head, all three should be in one line. Yes, this has been mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. But many centuries before the Bhagavad Gita, the same idea has been mentioned in the Upanishads. Trivunnatam prapya sthapya samam samasthiti. Trivunnatam sthapya samam shariram. That the body has to be placed for the sake of meditation in complete alignment, aligned, uplifted in three places. So, the idea has been mentioned in Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Guruji developed when he props from the idea of Sabija Samadhi. When Patanjali speaks about Sabija Samadhi, meditation, making use of props, he thought that when yogis use props for the sake of the mind to meditate, then why not should I make use of props to support the body? But where does the idea, Patanjali's idea, originate? In Kathopanishad. Etadalambanam shreshtham. This is the greatest prop. Etadalambanam param. This is the highest support. So there, in the Upanishads, particularly the Aranyaka texts, which you asked me the other day what they are all about these props. The whole idea of pranayama, meditation on prana, that is what we find in the Upanishads and in the Aranyaka texts. There the object of worship is nothing else, nothing external. For the ritualists, it is the fire burning in front of, in the fire pit. But as a person goes deeper, it is the inner fire, prana. Asatoma sadgamaya, tamasoma jyotirgamaya, these beautiful, which have become universal prayers. O Divine, lead me from darkness into light. O Divine, lead me from mortality into immortality. Lead me from the temporary into the eternal. These universal prayers, what are they dedicated to? They are from the Upanishads. What are they addressed to? To some divine out there? No. Look at the context. This is how the prana worshippers used to meditate, on the prana. So the whole idea of pranayama, again, it has been derived from the Upanishads. So here in this, just showing the connection, how deep the roots of yoga go and how deep they are found in the Vedic Upanishads. Now, coming back to this discussion of work, charity, sacrifice, austerity, the problem is that at some point a shift has to take place. Whether a person completely engages himself in charity, engages himself in sacrifices, in rituals, or engages himself in austerity, in voluntary hardship, tapas. Whatever he engages himself in hard work, at some point a shift has to take place, a deeper shift. And that deeper shift is an awareness of the pure consciousness within. That shift has to take place. And if that shift does not take place, then there is a tremendous loss. Because Yova etadaksharam gargi aviditva asma lokat preti. In one of the Upanishads, Maharshi Yagyavalkya speaks to Gargi, a female prophetess, a female avadhutani, not a prophetess, but a female avadhutani, like a female mystic who had thrown away all her bondages of life. So he has this discussion with her and he says, O Gargi, if a human being leaves the body without becoming aware of this imperishable entity within, then he dies a kripana. Kripana means a poor person, a spiritually poor person. He dies a kripana. So at some point that shift to the inner core has to take place. But at times it just doesn't. A person keeps on performing rituals, but that shift doesn't take place. A person keeps on performing, yes, they are necessary for purification, but then a moment of growth has to come. A person has to go deeper. But simply because we start enjoying these rituals, because we get, say, a lot of money by performing these rituals, such as the priests make a lot of money by performing these rituals. So they get attached. Yes, this is it. That's it. And everybody should just do this, because if everybody does it, then they will benefit. And the same is with charity. For the sake of charity gives us a good name, charity gives us a lot of contentment, charity gives us a lot of happiness. People get trapped into that. Now, going out of it does not mean to leave it. Going out of that means to still the search within has to continue, and a person has to go deeper. The same is true about tapas, austerity. A person can keep on performing austerity. That is what happened in the time of the Buddha. He saw these tapasvis in India performing austerity blindly and not gaining anything out of it. They were hanging themselves upside down from trees and all these sort of things. Well, we also do it here. We also do it. We also do it. It's not that strange. But then a moment has to come when a person has to go deeper. And if a person doesn't, and now this mantra is about that. Yes, he talked about working hard, but now he's talking about negligence of one's own self, which is another important aspect. And even this is what the Buddha, when he stood up against rituals, against ritualistic tendencies in India, and he said, go for something deeper, look for something deeper. People misunderstood him. They misunderstood him, yet again in the Vedas themselves, not only in any part of the Vedas, but the deepest ritualistic aspects of the Vedas. The Vedas themselves point out that you can keep on performing fire rituals, but your mind eventually will become completely deluded by that fire, and you will be completely exhausted with the smoke out of it. Agni mugdho dhumatantaha. That is the expression that is there in the Veda. Deluded by the fire and exhausted by the smoke, and yet swam lokam na prati prajanati. You still have not become aware of the self that is there within yourself, that inner core. But someone who becomes aware of the inner self, Atmanam Veda, Ayamahamasmiti, this is what I am, Saswam Lokam Prati Prajanati, he acquires that understanding. So this push that is there to look eventually, despite all these actions, and that is what, despite performing all this, at some point we have to change the direction of our awareness and look within. And this is exactly, for example, also when Bodhidharma in 520, he traveled to China and he met this great emperor, I must check his name, the Liang emperor, yeah, Wuti, yeah. And he was a very noble emperor who used to perform great deeds of charity, was known throughout the known world as a great noble emperor. Yet when Bodhidharma met him, to his dismay, what he stated, that the merit that applies to salvation cannot be accumulated through good deeds, through deeds of charity. So was he condemning charity? Was he saying, don't do charity? That is what the Buddha, even after enlightenment, did. He was taking care of the sick. He was serving the sick. But Bodhidharma realized that the emperor has reached a state where he is exhausting himself in his deeds of charity, yet he is not going deep. So that the same story we find in Chandogya Upanishad. There is this great king Ashwapati Kaikeya, and they are the same thing, a great noble king. And then Raikwa comes, and Raikwa tells him that, O king, you have to go deeper, you have to know yourself. So this negligence of oneself, of which this shloka, when it speaks of Atmahano Janaha, beings who are forgetful of the self, beings who are forgetful of themselves. And therefore, I think it was in 2004 or 2003 when I had started giving lectures here for the first time, when we started having these lectures, when Zubinji came, I remember he said something very beautiful, which I never forgot, that learn to relate the yogic concepts with yourself. So the example that he gave was, so for example, when you speak of ahimsa, then ahimsa is not only not committing violence towards others, it is also about committing violence against one's own self. So the example that he gave back then was such as when a person smokes, when a person drinks, it is committing violence against your own body. So that too is a form of ahimsa. Our harmful samskaras that we have accumulated without awareness, they are not just samskaras, they are harmful, they are literally harming us. Through them, because of these harmful tendencies, we are literally harming our body and we are harming our mind. We are harming our thoughts. So this word Atmahana, someone who commits violence against himself. Now some people think that this mantra is about suicide. Yes, some people think, because Atmahana, those who destroy themselves. But one does not destroy simply by hanging himself. There are so many ways of destroying oneself. And this mantra is about that. So, asurya namate lokaha Andhena tamasavritah tanste pretyabhigachanti yeke chatmahano janaha. The time is over. We will have to come back to this mantra again in our next class. This is a very beautiful mantra because it also talks about a very core idea, asura. It is related to asura. Now, on the face of it, asura is one of the most peculiar words, because when you go into the most ancient Vedic texts, you find asura as the name of the supreme divinity. That is what has gone also into the Persian religion, Zoroastrianism, where asura becomes ahura, ahura mazda. So much so that, for example, Rudra, Shiva in the Rig Veda has been referred to as Asuro Maha, the great Asura. But then, at some point in both traditions, because these both, they had a common origin, the Zoroastrian traditions and the Vedic traditions, they have a common Indo-European, or what they call the Indo-Persian, Proto-Indo-Persian religion. They inherit the same ideas, the same concepts. At some point, there came a division. And in that division, what happened? Something very strange. In the later Vedic traditions, Deva is a divine being and Asura became a negative being, demon. The opposite happened in the Zoroastrian tradition. In the Zoroastrian traditions, Asura is not only the name of the supreme divinity, the word Deva, which is for us the divine beings, in Zoroastrian traditions, Deva is the name of the demons. Yeah, Deva, yes. And this is not peculiar to the Zoroastrian tradition. Also in Taittiriya Samhita, in Krishna Yajurveda, I have seen the word Deva being used also for demons. So, but they have taken, so it means that both meanings exist in why this? Why this? This is a very interesting thing. Why this? And then what does really the word Deva and Asura mean? In this dichotomy between Deva and Asura, how it is related to Prana and Apana. Actually, Apana is Asura and Prana is Deva. In the Vedic, where Asura stands for the negative and Deva stands for the positive. Just change the words, it doesn't matter. You know, we are using these words. The concept is there in both traditions, the words have changed. But sometimes people find it very difficult to relate. So for example, why were the Yazidis persecuted in Iraq for centuries? Because the word for God that they used was the word that Islam used for shaitan, for devil. So that's why the Muslims started thinking that they are devil worshippers. And that's the reason they were persecuted. And till recently, hundreds and thousands of Yazidis have been killed in Iraq. Only because of this misunderstanding, or, yes. So, on the contrary, here, because we go into the deeper concepts, these external differences don't make any difference. The difference in words, we know that if a Zoroastrian person is using the word Deva, he's using it for what we use the word Asura. He uses the word Asura for what we use the word Deva. So there is no problem. There is no tension. There is no conflict. So, in this sense, the breath that goes in, which is the Upanishadic Apana, is from which asura, the negative tendencies, have arisen, and the breath that goes out, which is prana, from which all the devas have arisen, all the good tendencies have arisen. You see, someone who not only breathing in, it symbolizes taking into himself. And the other thing is giving out. This is the whole difference that is there between asura and deva, between a demon and a divine being. A divine being gives out, and a demonic being, an asura, takes in. He just wants to take everything. That is apana. And so all these discussions, but because the time is over today, so we will come back. This is how the Shatapatha Brahmana from the Shukla Yajurveda tells us how devas and asuras have come into existence. Asuras come into existence from apana, and devas come into existence from prana. Prana and apana, these two things. And how, so we will come back to this discussion in our next class, because this word asurya namate lokah andhena tamasa vritaha, which means that the realms belonging to the asuras, the ignorant beings engrossed in sense enjoyments. This meaning, how do we come to this meaning from asura, the supreme being, to this? All this we will discuss. It's an interesting journey of words, because so much is hidden within these words, which were used by those extremely ancient masters from ancient times, and they never got into conflict. If words lead to conflict, then it is a problem. But if the word helps us to go deeper, if the word helps us, because ultimately the Upanishads, Patanjali's teachings, all the teachings of the great masters have survived in the words. So we have to use them, we have to go through them eventually to reach that which transcends all words. So this conflict, Mahabharata, Bhagavata, Vishnu Purana, when they speak of Hari Medhas, which is the equivalent of Ahura Mazda in the Zoroastrian traditions, how the Mahabharata, how the Bhagavata, how the Vishnu Purana, these texts have brought together the traditions and have seen the similarities, so that there is no conflict at all, and therefore there was no conflict. Zoroastrianism has been in India for 1200 years. When they came to India, unfortunately when the circumstances in Iran were no more favorable for them to live there, those who said we won't convert, they came to India. They came with a very positive approach, because I think that story that is there, when when they came, and the king of Gujarat, there he said that I have no place, my kingdom is full, where will you live? Then so he sent, but he did not say it, he just sent some milk back to them, and then they put some sugar. Is that it? Yeah, the milk was completely full. So there was no place to put any more milk in it. So how, the idea was that how will you live in my country? So what they did, they put some sugar into it and sent it back to the king. And then the king realized that if I allow them to come, they will. And ever since they have been this beautiful tradition, extremely beautiful tradition, which once upon a time was governing most of the known world, because the Persian Empire was a great empire. Most of the known world was directly in clash with Rome, with the Roman Empire. There were many fights were fought between these two empires, and yet in India, beautifully, without any tension at all, this beautiful coexistence has been there. So we'll come back to these ideas again. Any questions?
I just want to say something.
Yes.
I was just thinking about Guruji, how much he worked. Guruji worked till the last moment. I have seen this by myself when I was there. Till the last moment when he gave up his body, he was working. And how much he worked with us to change our samskaras into yogic samskaras. Tirelessly he worked with us, and then, but at the same time also he never gave up his search for his own self. He was all the time trying to find out, working, and it was just amazing to see him like this till the last moment.
That is what took him into the very depth.
He went exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
And that is when he came here. I mean, don't be a practitioner, be a sadhaka. That was his whole point. When a person from that, while doing that practice, after a person has mastered an asana, goes deeper within himself, and that inward journey is what, how does a person master an asana? Prayatna Shaithilya is the first thing. The second thing is Ananta Samapatti, meditation on the infinity, meditation on the infinite. What is that infinite? That infinite is the consciousness within, that infinite consciousness of which Purnamadah Purnamidam. So how does a person master an asana? Ultimately, when a person goes deeper into that infinite. That is what, then that infinite pulls him deeper within himself, or the infinite lifts him into the infinite. That is what leads a person into the very depth of yoga. Yes.
A few thoughts around this. Just very quickly, the word devil itself could have its root in deva.
Yes, devil. Yes, devil. Yes. The word God, by the way, the English word God, has its roots in hu, which is what we use for havana, homa, sacrifice, to evoke the deity whose presence is evoked through sacrifices, through rituals. So that there is, I can't now remember the Sanskrit equivalent of the word derived from hu, which is extremely close to the word God, which has been used for Indra in the Rig Veda. Very similar word, and God has been derived from that. So devil has been derived from Dev, and God, similarly, God has been derived from hu. So yes, these words, they have their cognates in Sanskrit.
I just wanted to say, talking about the work in getting attached, I think what the difficult thing is about this in our day-to-day lives, because you were talking about doing rituals, or as the priests do, then going into a deeper shift. I think this awareness of pure consciousness within has to come through our everyday life, through work, through yoga we do, everything to go deeper. Because if you don't get into this pure consciousness, then of course desires, expectations in anything, this will lead to misery. Then at the beginning, I just thought of an idea, which is what is so difficult for all of us to do things with all of our love and not get attached. Not just to the result, because that actually could be possible.
Sangam tyaktva phalam chaiva, these two things, by renouncing, that is what he said earlier, nourish yourself with renunciation. Renunciation of what? Renunciation of sangha, clinging, attachment, and phala, and its fruit.
But what happens, let's say you have a garden, I'm just going to give this image here. You sow that garden, you have seeds, you take up seed. With that seed you give love, because whatever we do in life, I think the most important thing is to do it with love, right?
Yes.
So you put love into that seed, you put love into the ground, you put that seed in there with full love, but the minute there is this love, there is a type of an attachment, right? the day that you, even if you don't think about it, okay, I'm going to take care of this seed, this ground, I'll water it, put it in the right sun, everything done properly with love, and not with a full attachment, just do it. I think the second that you see a little flower coming up, there is that moment of, hey, you know, what joy, what beauty, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the thing I think to do is to live that joy in that moment without thinking or expecting that the next seed is going to do the same, because maybe that next seed isn't it, just nothing's going to happen. And you've given it the same love. To apply that into a day-to-day life is really difficult.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you keep repeating and we get disappointed. We have expectations.
With that, we get disappointed. Right? Yes.
That's why you have to say, okay, now enough for today.
Enjoy today.
Look,
enough for today.
Till the last moment, all the time, you know, people go asking, helping, he's helping. But he gives and he gives and he gives. But we have to know.
Even ourselves.
Because we need time for ourselves. So now for today, it's enough.
And then tomorrow,
and you don't have to feel bad again.
Yes.
You are eaten up, you know.
So
you have to get that strength.
And then I have also a question. But please, you first.
I was thinking, this process of awakening itself, don't you think, probably because the ingredients are also the work, as you said, and also the karmic evolution is experience and the grace, divine grace, that to happen?
The idea about grace in the Upanishads is that the grace of the divine is always there. The grace of the masters is always there. But because the word for grace here is kripa in Sanskrit, which is in fact also means capability. So that from the divine is always there, because the fact that we have been given the human body means the grace of the divine is there for everybody. But what lacks, the only thing that lacks, is our own grace. Our own. Now in English it doesn't work, but in Sanskrit, Atma Kripa. The capability that is required by purifying oneself, as you said, by doing the good karma, so that the good samskaras get strengthened, and these good samskaras eventually inspire our noble deeds themselves. They lead us into that level of inner purity where the thirst for something higher, where the thirst for something greater comes. And when that thirst comes, then a person goes deeper. So these good deeds, they develop that thirst. Noble deeds.
The minute you have that thirst, you want to drink.
Yes, then you want to drink.
But if it is good, drink it.
Yeah, of course.
But that is what leads us. What leads us. There are bad thirsts, there are good thirsts.
And we are coming here for practice. And when we practice here, we practice for ourselves. So what do we do? What is happening? Somehow slowly, samskaras are changed into samskaras.
Yes. Now, since we have a few friends from China here, I have a question to you. I have been told that the word Mandarin, which is the name for Chinese language, has been derived from mantrin, which means that it was originally the language of the ministers in the Chinese court, and that is what the Oxford Dictionary, in its derivation of the word Mandarin, it derives it from the Sanskrit word mantrin, the Oxford Dictionary. So, is this, or is there any, is this?
I've never given much thought about the English words, because we only use it in China. The Chinese, we say it's literally translation will be the language of the middle world or something like that.
The men of war.
The middle world.
The middle world,
yeah,
okay.
Because it's everything is centered. It's like the centered, or the language of the center. That's the That's the Chinese character.
Okay.
I never really thought about that.
Okay.
That English translation. So I'm sorry.
Interesting. I wonder if Tolkien got his idea from that. Middle Earth, you know, the great writer.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, he wrote The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. They made movies, but the book is just.
You're talking about the Middle Earth,
But
yeah.
it's the Middle Earth.
Yeah, because I always wanted to check this because
Sometimes we say like the middle plateau or the middle earth or the centered world, something like that.
He spoke
Bec-
30 languages, you know.
because in this very detailed Oxford dictionary, when I looked up the word Mandarin, it said that Mandarin were the ministers in the Chinese court. They were called Mandarin.
I need to check. I don't know.
Okay.
It's not that.
Yeah. And that's where originally the language originated. In there, they were called Mandarin, and from there the word then Mandarin eventually was evolved. That is what the Oxford dictionary tells us. So it would be if you can check this out, because I would like to hear it from a Chinese, because if it is really derived from the word mantrin, then it is deeply related to the word mantra.
Okay. All right.
You know,
I'll check it.
because mantra means a secret, and these are called mantra because they give secret teachings. A minister is called mantri because he gives secret advices to the king. Therefore, he is called mantri. And in most other South Asian countries, the word for minister is everywhere the same. In Indonesian language, it is Perdana Menteri, which is Perdana Menteri in Menteri. It's in most countries. So it is quite possible that. So it would be. I would like to hear it from, because yet Oxford Dictionary, I must trust it, because Oxford Dictionary is really, it's the best English dictionary, and when they speak of this derivation, then.
But is it the Oxford Dictionary, the one that never said Iyengar yoga is yoga with props?
It's Oxford Dictionary.
Yeah.
Is it Oxford Dictionary?
Yeah.
Okay, so then it's good. It's good if I get a confirmation. It's interesting for me because then it relates it with mantra, which is a secret teaching, which is, for example, the mantras that we are studying here in the Upanishads. Okay, so the final mantra we complete with this universal prayer. Yes.
And on Tuesday is no Upanishad.
Oh yes, on Tuesday there will be no Upanishad. And yeah, so. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi.